Depression brain tells you evil things. Depression brain tells you you can't get somebody who will treat you right. Depression brain tells you that you can't get somebody who will make you happy.
Hey, you. Thanks for tuning in. Just a quick heads up, this episode is rated PG-13, so expect to hear some mild language or adult concepts. One of the cool bonuses about a lifetime of polyamory are the friends and the partners who stay in range of our lives, even as our lives change. This conversation is with me and one of those darling people in my life. This is us talking about the places where our lives have touched. So this episode is with me and one of my ex-boyfriends. We're going to call him Mountain Man on the show because that's what I've been calling him for years and years. We've known each other for almost a decade and talked about him on the show since the beginning. This is his first time actually being on the show. It was funny when I shared this episode with a couple of friends to see what they thought. I got some surprising responses, including one who said, I don't ever want to talk to any of my exes again. I don't care what they think, which I can understand. I guess sometimes if you come to a point in a relationship with somebody where there's a break in trust or a break in respect, then I can understand why you wouldn't really want to have that person's input in your life anymore. But for me, a lot of my exes are the people that I trust most to reflect back to me what matters and what I'm missing. Because they know me, they know what matters to me, they know my patterns, they know how I lash out, and oftentimes they have enough distance that they can be a positive and enlightening influence, a useful mirror instead of a painfully destructive one. And this person, Mountain Man, is one of those people for me. For many years, we've been able to reflect back to each other enough in kind enough ways that despite not having the typical relationship trajectory, we have still really been able to maintain a space in each other's lives on and off for, I don't know, for a good long time. And I feel like that's something really special when you can have a friend who knows more about you than most of your just friends do, who's able to support you and willing to support you emotionally or however you need support, I guess, and who wants to be there for you. I mean, that's really cool. At least I think it is. Maybe you don't agree, and that's okay. And because of these conversations that I've been having with the early listeners of this episode, I've been realizing that it is kind of unusual to have this tight of a relationship with an ex-partner. And what has made it work for us, I think, is friendship. Like, we've always cared about some of the same things. We've always had a friendship based on that. And we've always cared about each other, right? So I want the best for him. He wants the best for me. Try and give each other the benefit of the doubt, even when we're upset. We recognize that just because we don't understand why the person is doing what they're doing, maybe they have a good reason. We've never tried to hurt each other. There were definitely some experiences earlier on where he would text me and I wouldn't text back for a few days, and he asked me not to do that. So it took us a little while to fine-tune response time and what turning towards means. But once we did, that was a huge impact in our ability to continue to be friends and be supportive to each other. And we got better at saying no when we meant no, and at decommitting from things that didn't feel right anymore. You'll hear us talking in here about some of that. Hey there, Mountain Man. Welcome to Pleasure Central Radio.
Hello.
And you can call me Rebecca. It's all right.
Hello, Rebecca.
So I wanted to have you on the show here today because we have had a really unusual, very long relationship, actually, which has bounced back and forth from all kinds of like traditional boyfriend-girlfriend thing at one point to now a very different, very lighthearted friends with occasional benefits, but just good friends So I thought it would be fun to have you here in the recording studio and talk a little bit about it and see if we can pass on some wisdom, because I think we have learned a lot.
Yeah, I think over our long journey, we have definitely learned a few lessons of what works, and especially for people who find each other a lot of fun, but have very different desires and what they want their lives to look like.
Yeah. Now, speaking of very long, how long have we known each other? I think you figured it out, right?
8.5 years.
Oh my gosh. And do you want to tell a little bit about how we met?
Okay, so that was quite a while now. I was fairly new to poly at the time. I had some friends with benefits, but I hadn't had an actual poly girlfriend. And I remember this was back when OkCupid was actually fairly good. You could send messages and see your incoming messages without having paid. And I was going through profiles, and I came across your profile. And of course, I'm like, oh, this girl's gorgeous. And I'm reading the profile, and she seems really fun. And I don't know exactly why, but normally, I remember I told you about this one time. Normally, I thought my first messages through quite thoroughly, which showed in the response rate I got. It was really atypical. But for years I've got to message this girl now. And so, I didn't really think it through that deeply. I don't even remember what I said now, but it was some quickly, hey, you seem cool, or something like that. And fortunately, you responded, because it was not the best first message ever.
Well, it was good that you did respond that quickly, because I remember, I think I only had a dating profile up for 3 weeks that time. It was the first time I had really officially done online dating, and it happened so quickly. And I found you and Mark, and I was like, okay, I'm happy, I'm good, I'm done now. And I had another partner at the time, too. So you also you were married.
Yes.
Right. So you were testing out poly.
Yeah.
And I bet I was quite an interesting person to jump into that with.
Definitely. Definitely. Very, very, poly knew me at the time. And, you very experienced with it. I also remember something interesting about that time. I remember you, we talked, and then you disappeared for 3 days. And then you popped back up and we talked for an hour or two, and you disappeared for 4 days. And I'm like, what's going on? Is she getting bombarded with messages and just running away? Because I remember we talked about this, and you confirmed that. And then you come back the last time, you're like, I'm going to turn off my profile. Here's my email.
Yeah, basically. I had decided who I wanted to see for a little while and keep staying connected to, and that was a good choice. Yeah. So we met about 8.5 years ago. We started dating, and you're better at timelines than I am. What happened next? We dated for a while, right?
Yeah, we dated, officially dated for almost exactly a year.
That was it?
Yeah, it was almost exactly a year.
Oh, okay.
Almost to the day. I think it was to the week.
I promise that was not intentional. But I do remember one of the first polycule things that we did was Thanksgiving at your house with your wife and her girlfriend, I think. And we played...
It was her friend.
Her friend. Okay. Anyway, and we all played Cards Against Humanity together. That was the most untraditional Thanksgiving I think I've ever had.
Probably the most untraditional Thanksgiving I've ever had either, I guess, at this point. Okay, timeline. And so I needed a little space after that, so we weren't talking too much, just a few messages here and there. And then about 2 weeks before my birthday, so that was about 3 months later, I met 2 gals at an event, well, 2 different events, but very close timeline. And they both seemed cool and interested. One of them ended up going nowhere, but the other I ended up dating for 6 years. And I remember texting you when I first met the 2 of them, telling you about it, because I knew you'd be happy for me and you'd like to hear about it. And, as the conversation went on, it kind of became hey, what are you doing? Do you want to hang out? We had fun.
Nice. That's funny. I remember it a little bit differently. I remember we hadn't been dating and we hadn't been talking for at least almost a year or something like that. And your birthday was coming up and it's the same day as Christmas. And I reached out to make sure that you weren't going to be alone and not doing anything that day, because I was not doing anything that day. And it just so happened that there was a good time to get together, and we connected and reconnected, and it was very sweet and lovely. And then we were friends with benefits for a while, months.
2 years or something like that?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
A year or two. This detail of the timeline I can't quite remember. It did. Oh, that's why I can't remember, because instead of like being an abrupt end, we just kind of both got busy, and so our visits to each other kind of dwindled naturally over time, because you were busy with partners, and so was I. And then it just dwindled and it was quiet for a while, and then something happened, and we don't need to go into the details, but I broke up with my now ex-wife. And I texted you a week or two after I made that decision, once I had calmed down from the actual impact of the decision. And I was telling you about it, and then we ended up reconnecting and seeing each other every week, every other week for another 9 months or something like that.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact timeline at this point. We've gotten too far into the muddiness where we're just kind of drifting back and forth across levels of attachment to each other. Yeah, so we started seeing each other regularly again. And I tried doing tango with you.
2 classes or 3 classes, right? Because it was a beginning.
It was 4.
4 classes.
Yeah, it's 4. And now I understand in retrospect, because I've learned some things that we'll get to later. I was enjoying it, both for itself and then even more so for doing it with you. But I was also extremely self-conscious about it. And that made it not fun for you.
Yeah, I remember that. And it was interesting because I was still pretty much a beginner as well. It was, I don't know, maybe the 3rd or 4th tango class I had taken. So we were both fairly new, but it's interesting. I am always telling people not to do this, not to go and take a dance class together if they've never actually danced before, because it's so much pressure to be a lead and all of a sudden trying to figure out how to move the other person across the floor without stepping on them and without and not having that kind of body training in your body already. It's, oh my God, it's so hard to not be good at something, especially for as long as it takes to be a good dancer. So I totally understood the self-consciousness. And yeah, it wasn't fun. We didn't learn a lot because there was not a lot of brain balance to allow us to learn, I guess.
Yeah, I'd say that's a good way of putting it. And I guess it's probably now that I'll have to explain what I learned later. So I learned later, 2 years after this, that I had been chronically low-level depressed probably since I was 5. And so I was going through life unmedicated, depressed, trying to deal with that. And one of the consequences was that self-consciousness. I couldn't exist in spaces where I had no benchmark for how well I was doing at something, how quickly I was improving at it. Even if I found it fun, without that, it still was just too anxiety-making for me. And, it's amazing what a little medication can do.
Yes.
I have a fitness watch. Of course, I have a fitness watch. I'm a mountain man. I do too many mountain things. But when I started taking those meds, my resting heart rate dropped by, my sleeping resting heart rate dropped by 10 beats per minute. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's quite a big deal.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a lot of chronic stress. I remember a couple of weeks ago we were hanging out and you were telling me how much better you had been doing for the last few months. And you said something about chronic depression sometimes presents as you just acting like a fucking asshole. And I was like, oh, yeah. Sometimes I see that on myself, too. I see, why am I being an asshole? Oh, yeah. It's because it's the middle of winter in Seattle and I need to up my vitamin D. Or, I need to get outside and do something and find some passion again because it's all evaporated. So I'm really glad that you said that and that you have that self-awareness, because self-awareness is way sexier than ignorance.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And that brings us to this, because I don't remember if we actually defined it as formally dating again when we were seeing each other every week that second time and dancing and stuff like that. But before the class was even done, you're like, I don't want to hang out for a while. And then later we talked about it, and you had told me that like I was just like angry. And now in retrospect, I wasn't consciously aware I was angry. Part of that chronic depression becomes anxiety. And like you're routing your inputs directly to your amygdala before you, instead of going up to the parts of the brain where you decide the level of reaction you're supposed to have, it's going straight to the amygdala. And there was some things going on in the world, political things that are entirely justifiable to be angry about. I couldn't calm my nervous system back down after them and just exist and chill and have fun with an awesome person. And so, of course, you're like, this is way too much angry energy. I need this away.
Yeah. And it was also difficult to watch you going through what you were going through, the relationship split, and how much bitterness was being held there. And I totally understand. Sometimes we are just hurt beyond repair, and it takes a long time to get past that. And from my perspective, it was so hard to be another woman watching you bitch about this other person who was so important to you and be like, okay, is that going to be me next? What the fuck? Right? Because I knew that I didn't have the same behavior patterns as her, but how much you were holding on to that and stuck with it was part of what made it really hard to be around. Because it wasn't just the anger. It was the anger and the bitter and that's like, I don't know how to help you. I'm sorry. What if I could? But I don't know how.
That makes sense. I don't think you actually mentioned that part of it before, but that does make a lot of sense. And even though, like, we both know you could never be in that situation, you would never be her, you would never take advantage of me of that in fashion, even if you could. It's still not a fun energy to be around. Completely understandable. And I think if I had known that you were picking up on that a little too much, if I was expressing it too much at the time, I could have done. But again, this is us figuring out things in retrospect.
Years later.
Exactly. Years. Like, this is four years later now, I think. So
yeah, that's about right.
But that figuring things out in retrospect is also an important part of this conversation, because being able to figure things out is one of those important details for being able to sustain an evolving relationship, or any relationship, really, even if it's a stable, like you're like super tight partners, you're nesting partners. You need that turning towards each other after conflict and figuring things out eventually and going, oh, this is what is happening in retrospect, and being able to talk about it.
It is really helpful. I agree. Yeah, and I think for me, it's particularly hard knowing that as bad as someone is behaving, even when they are being awful, taking advantage of someone, being manipulative, all of those things, nobody does that unless they are really, really hurt. And so I understood your bitterness, but I also understood that someone was really, really hurt in order to do that, right? And I've been really hurt in relationships, and I've done things that I wish I'd never done. And I've stormed out of restaurants at brunch. What the fuck? Like, that is so not me. But, there was a time when I didn't know that I should have something to eat before 11. And I didn't know that I shouldn't show up at a restaurant at 11 for brunch, wait 45 minutes for a table, and then eat a bunch of pancakes and, like, Swedish pancakes with sugar and dairy on them. Yeah. That is definitely going to make me touchy. It still will. But now I have more understanding about what I need. So I just don't end up in those situations anymore. I don't know what someone else had that might make them react that way, but I know that it can't have been fun. Otherwise, people just aren't assholes if they're not in pain.
Oh, definitely. Like, part of me is still angry at her behavior because it's an appropriate reaction to it. But now it's that cold intellectual anger. Like, grr, what you did was really bad and evil. But you're right. Her behavior absolutely came from a place of pain. Like, I also feel sorry for her because there's two women in my life who are in my past who both of them, I'd say, took advantage of me. And both of them are in that spot where now, like, I can't even be mad at them. I feel bad for them because they're stuck in a place of pain and dysfunction. I can't help them. I can't. I've tried. I got mildly, politely chewed out by my therapist for taking it way too far in trying to help them.
Yeah, and let's see, that would be a symptom of insecure attached, preoccupied insecure attached?
Not quite, but that was definitely a contributing factor. Absolutely a contributing factor, along with the depression, because depression brain tells you evil things. Depression brain tells you you can't get somebody who will treat you right. Depression brain tells you that you can't get somebody who will make you happy. Even this fall, when I was getting ready to go on dating sites. So for the context here, I have a new wonderful partner who I've been seeing for about 4 months. She is absolutely awesome. And I didn't think I would meet somebody. I was, seeing like the negatives, like, because I don't know if Rebecca's ever mentioned on her podcast before, but I'm a cancer survivor. I have this huge scar from the surgery, and I don't know. I think I'm pretty average looking, and like I'm not Fabio. And so and when I was getting ready for getting dating profile set up, I hadn't had that depression diagnosis yet. It was literally like I was a month before this diagnosis when I was getting ready to set up my profiles. And here's Rebecca giving me pep talks and some of my other female friends giving me pep talks that you will absolutely find the person that you want and blah, all this. And I'm like, but yeah, look at me. And
it seems impossible until you find it and you're like, oh, well, yeah, of course. There's someone out there that likes me. I'm pretty cool.
Yeah. I actually started the meds a week before meeting this woman. It was the most
good timing.
Perfect timing ever. So we were talking about, I had a couple negative partners. And of course that wasn't fun to be around because at the time, I didn't fully understand how they were affecting me. And I didn't yet understand how to move forward. Some of it, obviously, you just need time to move forward. But at the same time, I just didn't know how to quite accept fully that their behavior wasn't reflective of something about me, which is part of depression brain speaking.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And I have noticed a big personality difference in you. So good for you for taking care of yourself. And yeah, it was fun this summer knowing, hey, you're going to meet someone. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be great. There's lots of opportunities out there. I think one of the great things about this whole COVID relationship breakup pandemic is that there are now a lot of people that wouldn't have been single a couple of years ago because they're so amazing. And now they are. They have a lot more stress experience and have learned to be a bit more resilient whether they want to do or not. And now people are back out and dating and checking things out. And yeah, so I knew you would find somebody.
Yeah. There's not only the people who they learned, but they learned their own value. Because a lot of from the people I've talked to, a lot of the relationships that didn't survive COVID were relationships where there was some problem. Usually one partner is capable of processing, moving forward, and handling the problem, and the other won't. And so you get a lot of people who are actually awesome experienced people who are now available. So,
hey.
Yeah.
Lucky you.
Yep, perfect timing on that part.
And lucky me.
Yes.
Okay, so the first time that we dated, I remember that we were calling each other boyfriend, girlfriend, and at some point I started to feel like that wasn't working for me. And not so much the relationship, but the title. And I couldn't figure out why, and it still is to this day a bit of a problem. I don't want to be anybody's girlfriend. And there's a very rare exception to that.
A certain level of, intertwinedness is implied by that title. And it was a bit too much intertwinedness for us. It was implying the wrong energy to you. And so it just kind of, I guess, built up pressure on you, and you had to hit eject.
Yeah, and I wonder if this is part of why you assumed that I was a fearful, avoidant person?
That's entirely possible why I thought you were fearful avoidant, because that did come across as fearful avoidant behavior. But with a little bit more information, again, us being able to figure out things, even if it's delayed, it makes sense where it was just a little stifling, which is another thing that, we figured out in retrospect, because we both read the book Polysecure. I was fairly familiar with attachment theory, but I hadn't seen anything about applying attachment theory to poly. And combine that book with, it was a month, maybe, after I got the "you've been depressed your entire life" diagnosis. And I suddenly put the connection together that consciously, every time we were seeing each other regularly, consciously I was trying to respect our negotiated level of commitment. But subconsciously, my emotional attachment system was casting around and trying to grasp too strongly. And I wasn't aware it was doing that. And so it would start trying to grasp at you, and you're like, no!
Hang on, I'm not prepared for that level of involvement. Yeah, that does sound about right. And I think we did a pretty good job of navigating that, all things considered, because we've always been just really honest with each other. I'm pretty sure we've never lied to each other. I can't think of any time.
I can't think of any time either. We've always been really good about turning towards each other when there's conflict and talking it out, trying to figure where we're not matching up and what we can do about it. That is, again, one of those key points in a successful relationship, evolving or otherwise, is you've got to turn towards each other.
Otherwise, you're not in a relationship anymore soon.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that letting a relationship die off in that direction, I think, is usually one of the hardest ways to do it. Not always the hardest way, because I have had a relationship that just sort of drifted off into something, but it wasn't like we ghosted each other. However, it was really helpful that he was able to talk and say, hey, this is what's going on. I'm not going to be able to hang out for a while. This is still going on. This is taking a really long time. This is 6 months now that we haven't seen each other, right? But the fact that we were still communicating was helpful enough to maintain something until we were able to get together and say, all right, this isn't going to be able to continue happening. And now what are we going to do? And I still have brunch with him like once a year. So.
Yeah. Well, respecting each other's time, even when there's some external force interfering, because I think I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
There was an external, if there's external forces interfering with the relationship, and sometimes it just, those external forces make it not possible. But the fact that you kept communicating, that's showing respect for each other, even if you can't spend time together. You're still valuing each other, and even if it ends in bummer, we can't hang out anymore, the external forces have made it untenable.
So I don't think I've talked about the second time that we broke up yet. But first, I realize we have a really unique opportunity here. We've had a couple of different relationships over almost a decade. And there's been 3 major transitions in our relationship. And I thought it would be fun if we have each one of us give one statement about what happened during each breakup, so we can see now, with the benefit of perspective, both whether or not we agree, and kind of help highlight how even when 2 people never lie to each other and they care about each other and they're friends, how things can be miscommunicated. You game?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so before I talk about the second breakup, let's see. My statement for the first breakup is I got really busy and I still wanted to spend time with the people that I cared about, but stuff was falling off my plate and I couldn't let the businesses that I was building take the hit. So I had to find some creative way of working around it. And when I looked at my life and I realized that what I really cared about, like spirituality was a big, big piece of my life, you didn't fit in with the spirituality because of some of the beliefs that you have. And so we were often kind of like both butting heads on it. And then when we weren't butting heads on it, you just couldn't hang out with a bunch of my friends because you'd get in arguments with them. So I thought, okay, if I've got to figure out how to adjust my life, this is how it's going to go. That was longer than one statement. Damn it. All right, your turn.
I guess that's kind of how it's more details, but I saw it externally as in like basically you decided you couldn't date me because I didn't believe your same beliefs. So I guess we understood that one on the same page, and I was just like, what?
Yeah. Disappointing, but it is what it is, right?
I was a little irked, but yeah, just mostly disappointed.
And then the second time was a little bit similar, but it was when you were really stuck in the anger and the bitterness of other things going wrong in your life. And there was a whole lot of that, and it was too hard to be around. So I realized that you'd probably heal better on your own without me nagging at you about it.
That time I was very confused. But that goes back to I didn't know how much of that energy I was emitting. It was coming out subconsciously a lot more than I realized. And all I knew is like we were doing tango classes and I thought we were having fun, and then suddenly you didn't want to see him. Like, now I realized we mentioned this before, that the first time we quote unquote broke up, that was some of the things that made me think you were fearful avoidant. This was also one of the contributing factors to making me think you were fearful avoidant. Where now in retrospect, I know like you were just overwhelmed in different ways. Like the first time your schedule was overwhelmed, and the second time, like the negative energy that was shedding off me, that I needed to get it off me, but I just didn't know how to channel it in the right direction. So it was going all ways instead of over there in the dump.
Yeah,
yeah.
And actually, I have a question about that, because I know that there are people out there in situations like that. I know sometimes I've been the depressed one that someone has to leave because they just can't stand to be around me. I'm not the happy-go-lucky Rebecca sometimes. So was there anything that I could have said that would have helped you get help quicker or helped you understand what it was?
I think so. And I would like to also point out that we should never expect our partners to always be super happy and up and stuff. We should always expect to support our partners when they're having a hard time. But sometimes their hard time is way too hard for us to handle. And we need to accept that we are not expected to be the hero. We need to respect our own limits and not give too much of ourselves. And in this case, it was a combination of the state of the world, which was obviously, it was quite frankly, a very disturbing state of the world, combined with the way my ex was acting. And I'm not sure if you could have explained. I was at like the start of the road of the journey of fixing the results of my chronic depression, but I wasn't on the road yet. And I guess the only thing you could have done at the time is encouraged me a little more to start seeing a therapist.
And everybody loves it when you say that, right? Honey, I love you very much, but you should go get therapy.
The thing is, people need to realize that that statement can completely come out of love.
Yes, I totally agree.
Sometimes people are saying it to be an ass, but it can also completely come out of love. And so after that, we transitioned to seeing each other less, and I met another gal who ended up not being a great. She had her own stuff, but she actually gave me the nudge I needed to get on that road. And so even though in the end that didn't work out with her, I'm still glad that I met her.
Well, hey, cheers, Meta. That was really cool. Yeah, I had an aha a year or two ago, something like that, where I realized what people could have said to me when I was having issues that I probably should have gotten more help with was some version of, I love you and you have to do better. Just that reminder of, hey, you're not being abandoned here, but you're not doing well enough. You need to be able to hold yourself up. You need to be able to and I'm not looking at you saying you need to be, I'm saying I have realized that I need to bring more of myself to the world, really. But I need to be able to take care of regular things in my life better so that I'm not so stressed and be a grown-up, be an adult, right? And I do kind of wish someone had said that to me. So would that have been helpful? Do better or something, some version of that?
I'm not honestly sure, but absolutely I needed to do better. Fortunately, we've always had this ability that we mentioned before where we turn towards each other and we can talk about it. And eventually, I was able to do better. Yeah, that's right. Eventually you were. Yeah, and I think that turn towards is important. But the other thing that really is important that I don't think we've said is that we've never tried to hurt each other. And we've never been stuck together in the same house and so frustrated that we had to hurt each other because there was no other outlet, right? That's been a problem for me before, living with people or spending too much time living with people. We've always been able to take space from each other when we need it. You've always been willing to let me try to do better, which is something that's very important because not everybody gives the chance to do better. And that is another one of those things that's important for the long-term sustainability of a relationship. Good relationships come from both people trying to do better for the other person. And that means you must be able to accept each other as flawed and accept each other as struggling to do better. And sometimes you can help each other do better. Sometimes you can't. And sometimes, fortunately, this has never happened with us, but it happened with somebody else in my life. You have to realize there is absolutely nothing you can do for them. And you need to do better for yourself. Yeah. Doing better for yourself is probably a much higher priority than doing better for other people. But it is nice to have them both there. It is really beneficial, I think, to have other people that you can do things for. I cook for myself all the time. I don't necessarily enjoy it as much as if I'm cooking for other people. It's way more entertaining and more engaging for some reason. Yeah, definitely. And when you do well by yourself, that enables you to do well by others. And with others. Yes. Yeah. Hear, hear. I feel like we're preaching to the choir now. Definitely. All right. So then the third time, what do you want to talk about the third time? I'm honestly not super sure what happened there. From my perspective, it just kind of seemed like you weren't interested anymore. You weren't having fun for some reason, and I couldn't figure out was it me? And I know this third time happened during the pandemic. And at first we were both like, hey, we can hang out with each other in the pandemic and help relieve the loneliness and stuff. But I don't know what changed quite on your side, but it fizzled, and it fizzled rapidly. Yeah, well, there's a couple of reasons for that. And one is keep in mind the context. So when this happened, we'd been kind of occasionally seeing each other for a couple months, every couple weeks or something like that, I think. Yeah. And so for context, this was 4, 5, 6 months into the pandemic. And I had spent 3 of the last
6 months on crutches, alone, in an apartment with stairs where I had to hop up and down the stairs all the time, make food for myself, and then figure out how to replace all of the things that I used to do to keep myself sane. Because as an entrepreneur, I work from home. So I would go out to work out to be social, and I would go out dancing to be social, and I would go out to eat with my friends to be social. And all of a sudden, not only are all these things closed down, but most of my friends are so nervous and afraid that they're unwilling to hang out. Like a few of them were still willing to go on walks, and I totally understand that. But so much of my social life had shut down, and the things that I'd used to balance myself out were not there. There were riots in my city. There was all kinds of crazy things going on that I had no ability to really react and respond in a strong way. And so what happened for me, yes, we were keeping each other company, and that was fun during the pandemic, but I was also figuring out, I might have to come up with a new way of having an income stream overnight. And how am I going to do that? So I'm working more on some entrepreneur projects and doing some other things that were really important to me. And I realized that I wanted to have more of that stable relationship structure. And it wasn't like we couldn't be doing that at the same time, but you're sitting there in your corporate job doing your 9 to 5 and trying to spend as much time outside as you can. And I'm in a completely different mindset. And basically 24/7, because there's nothing to do outside of the house, so might as well work all the time. What else am I going to do? Yeah, so my needs had changed so much that we weren't a fit again, which is kind of what has happened, the first time and then the third time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess we kind of drift. I remember our original idea for this episode and this conversation came up because you and I want very different things for our lives. You're very much about all your entrepreneur projects and all that, and I'm super excited for you with your projects. I see that they, bring you joy and they're fun, and I do try to support them as when I can and how I can, such as, hey, this interview right now. But I've kind of achieved my goals. I wanted a comfortable life and a comfortable job that would give me time for vacations. Like, I know you've mentioned me on the podcast before. I love road trips to national parks. I've got 28 days on the mountain this ski season. As soon as that job, that 9 to 5 is done, I am doing something fun. And so we kind of don't mesh there all the time. And so I think it's always been a little bit about, for us, in trying to navigate where the places we do connect and finding the joy in where we do overlap. It's just not a huge amount of overlap on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and even the places that we live are diametrically opposed. like me, I'm living in uptown in the middle of the city, as in the middle of the action as I can get, but I've got my own little space and I work in my house and it's just me, right? So I like to be able to go outside, see a bunch of people, and come back inside. And you, whenever you buy a new house, you buy it further and further away from the city because you want to be close to the mountains, which makes perfect sense. But it would drive me crazy.
And part of that's just being frugal, because I look at the prices in the city and, understand that I'm a Midwestern boy. I look at the prices out here and I'm just like, oh my freaking God. But at the same time, I do like a certain amount of urbanness. I like the conveniences of civilization, like my fiber optic internet connection. But I don't like the city core. I'm always only ever going to be a visitor to the city core. So this is just another spot that, we don't quite mesh up.
Yeah. Or I think you said earlier, sometimes you work really well together as people, but your lives aren't the same shape.
Yes. And we always trying to find the fun overlap in those shapes. But that doesn't mean we can do that often. And so we have this 8.5 years where we've found a lot of joy with each other when we can. We can never be that nesting partner with poly people because the shapes of our lives are just too different.
But I'm glad that we were honest enough with each other this whole way to figure that out, right? Because we could have ended up trying to force it and have another really unpleasant, angry, bitter experience at some point. And we didn't. We decided to be thoughtful and to maintain our connection at a place where we can actually still like each other all the time.
Yes. Yeah, like you said, instead of forcing too many moments, we just try to find that balance where we can connect. Sometimes, it's always nice when it can be a periodic, even if it's this low frequency, but where we can find that spot where our shapes touch and we go enjoy them together.
I like that. Find that spot where our shapes touch and go enjoy them together. Maybe that should be the subtitle of this episode.
Speaking of touching our shapes, over time, we've found some things that we can improve on. And every relationship can always improve on something, even if it's just a friendship. In our case, we both have a little bit of attachment distress in our history.
Oh, this might be a good time to explain what that means if we're going to talk about it.
That is a good point. So we're referencing attachment theory. And in attachment theory, there's secure attachment, and then there's various types of insecure attachment. And I would say that most people drift a little bit on it. And usually if you have insecure attachment, it's because of adverse experiences, like being abandoned. When people say abandonment issues, they're often talking about insecure preoccupied attachment. And like when I mentioned earlier that my attachment system was kind of casting about subconsciously and stifling Rebecca a little, that was when I'm in insecure attachment, I am insecure preoccupied, and that it's very intense. You're stuck on the person. You can't stop thinking about them. You're afraid that you're going to lose them, and so you kind of overdo a lot. And then there's like fearful avoidant, and those are kind of the people that when you start getting close to them, they run away. Because suddenly it gets too serious and they're afraid and they scamper away because they can't deal with that. And there's two other types that I don't have great top of the head recollection of them. One's like disorganized, and the other's, the other one is dismissive, where like they dismiss the entire, like, oh, I don't need attachments, basically, is what they're saying, because they got so used to having to be on their own that even the idea of not being on their own makes them afraid. But there's also legitimate levels of attachment insecurity. Say you're a secured attached person, or what's called earned secure attachment. That's somebody who has a history of insecure attachment, who's done the work, who's done the therapy or gotten the meds they need, or just over time healed on their own, who now can form secure attachments.
They don't have to start out insecure attached, though. Earned secure attachment can be from any of the attached levels.
So yeah, earned secure attachment is basically when you now can attach securely, but you weren't originally in secure attachment naturally because of your life experiences. So you can be in secure attachment or earned secure attachment, but then like the other person, something happens that makes you legitimately nervous that they might be pulling away from you. It could be stress in their life that they're kind of cocooning a little bit, and you just need to have a conversation with them. Hey, what's going on? Sometimes it can be they promise something and then they don't carry through with it. Sometimes I guess the easiest way to say it is anything that would make you think that they're not valuing you can put you into a state where you're legitimately insecure about the attachment without being in quote unquote insecure attachment. You have a little bit of attachment anxiety for a legitimate reason.
So basically what you're saying is if your partner is cheating on you or is doing something that's causing them to pull away from the relationship, that should cause some kind of distress, but it's a legitimate attachment distress. It's not, you're just being an insecure person, suck it up.
Exactly. And so over time, we learned some of those things where we were accidentally making each other feel attachment insecurity. Like me trying to attach too much in a way creates attachment insecurity because now she's feeling stifled and like it makes her feel like it's insecure because I'm being too much, and that might be masking something.
Yeah. Well, for instance, this is a good one. So you take awesome road trips in the summer when you have your vacations, and you've wanted to bring me along numerous times. And the first time where it started to be like, okay, this is too much and this is not okay, was we started talking about making plans, but I wasn't ready to put anything on the calendar because we hadn't talked very much about it. And then you were like, okay, so I'm thinking we do this week and this month. And I was like, well, wait a minute. Let me think about this. Summer is the busiest time for my work. I love Seattle in the summertime. I don't actually want to be anywhere else but Seattle in the summertime. And you want to take me into the desert where I've been all my life. Nothing wrong with this. Like, I think this could be really fun. I do like road trips, but it's not the right time. It doesn't fit. The only reason why it got to be a problem was because you didn't actually ask me to go. You just assumed that I was going to go and that a week in the summertime I would be a fuck yes for. But because I didn't have an opportunity to explain, it was like, hey, wait a minute. No. Okay, that is over-attached. That is insecure attachment, right?
Yeah, that might not have been... I don't think you had mentioned this before. And in retrospect, hearing you, I think I had thought you had said yes to the trip. But this is a great demonstration of how little miscommunications can snowball into big issues.
Yeah. Well, glad we figured that out.
Like, what, 5 years later?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I'm really glad that we brought that up and talked about it, because you know what? This reminds me of something. We figured out how to work with this in our relationship, but I'm a huge fan of Google Calendar. And once I was able to show you how my Google Calendar works and what mattered to be on there and stuff, I remember you used to flirt with me, and I would call it this to other people, by sending me calendar invites for things that we were going to do. And it's the nerdiest thing, but it always made me so happy, and I loved it. And I think that's why I didn't think I had said yes to a trip, because there wasn't a calendar invite. Until something is on my calendar, it's not real. So that is really funny.
Well, I've always joked that polyamory is a relationship with N people and N+1 Google calendars.
That's pretty funny. All right. Well, I think we can look back on this conversation and in the last 8.5 years that we've known each other and see that friendship has definitely been a thread throughout this entire thing. Romance has come and go, and physicality play has come and go, and who knows where it will end up, and if it ever does. Hopefully we know each other for a very long time, and we can continue to support each other and enrich each other's lives for ages.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
We've always valued each other, no matter what we're doing with each other. Or what we're not doing with each other at that time.
Yeah. And I think this is a good, very clear demonstration of the fact that we like people. And people grow and change, and we keep liking people because they're people. We don't like them because of what we get out of them. We like them because of what we can create with them.
Yeah. Creation.
Hell yes. Well, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show, Mountain Man, and thank you so much for these years of pleasure.
It has been absolutely a pleasure to know you for the last 8.5 years.
And here's to many more.
Yes.
Were you surprised at how this conversation turned out? I was. I learned a lot. One of the things that I like about my job the most is that I get to listen to people. I get to listen to people on the podcast. I get to listen to my clients. And I love that because listening builds understanding. Understanding builds empathy. And empathy can help us be kinder to ourselves and to each other. I think the key to our success in this episode was that we were both in a good place when we had these conversations. We still care about each other, so we were willing to share ourselves as openly as we could and trust that the other person had our best interest at heart as well. And we had the understanding and empathy that helped us both be better to ourselves and to each other. If this conversation has sparked a desire within you to reconnect with someone about your past, maybe get some healing or some clarity on your relationships, I'd recommend you think about a few things first. I find when I'm doing something emotionally challenging that it's really helpful to have a good friend who knows you and loves you and can talk things through with you and help you stay sane while you navigate this conversation. Because undoubtedly things are going to come up. And if you're both in a really good place before you have the conversation, that's going to make this so much easier. But one way or another, stuff is going to come up. And having someone that you can trust to talk this over with will be very helpful. The other thing I want to say is know when to walk away. No one who wants you to be upset, off balance, or unwell is worth spending time with. So if whoever you're having this conversation with is enjoying making you sad or enjoying making you feel bad about yourself, just leave. You don't have to continue and put up with any kind of abuse, no matter what it is. And I know that whatever you find out about yourself, it's new information and you can't judge your former actions from your new place of knowledge. So if you learn something and you realize, shit, that was really my fault, or damn it, I wish I'd been able to do this differently, or I wish I'd seen that while it was happening, it's okay. It happens to us all. You'll be okay. If you can, apologize for it. If you can't, forgive yourself and move on. And know that the point of having conversations like this is not to justify what you've done or to make anybody else feel better. It's so that you can move forward in a way that is stronger and full of life. You're not having to repeat the same patterns that you've done before because now you know how to learn from them. Once we see the way those repeated patterns have affected our lives and choose something else, everything changes for us. And that's good news. It's a little scary because now you have no idea what to expect. You don't know what comes next. Everything is new. But it's also freedom. So, enjoy it. And I hope you have many, many friends to support you. Hey there, pleasure seeker. Well, that's it for today's conversation. Here at Pleasure Central Radio, we love using conscious communication, science geekery, and copious amounts of true pleasure to improve our partnerships, our money, and our love lives. And we hope you do too. If you loved what you heard here, we'd love a review. You can do this easily on podcast players like Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It only takes a couple of seconds, and it's an easy way to help more people discover the show without you having to actually bring it up with them. To hear other episodes of the podcast and get notified immediately when a new episode is released, follow me on your favorite podcast player. Find out more and get in touch at pleasurecentralradio.com. Your thought to ponder today is, and that you have that self-awareness, because self-awareness is way sexier than ignorance.
Definitely.
So you may have noticed that we talked a lot about attachment styles in here, and I'm going to have to do another episode where I talk some more about these books that we mentioned. So we're going to be talking about Polysecure, which is a book by Jessica Fern. So if you want to catch up on some of these references that we made about attachment theory, I wouldn't say just go and get any book on attachment theory. Polysecure is one that I actually respect. It's one of the few that I respect on the topic. So if you want to know what we're talking about when we put out that episode, then go and download Polysecure and catch up, and I'll see you in a couple more weeks.
Thanks for listening to Pleasure Central Radio, hosted by Rebecca Beltran. The guest today was Mountain Man. Technical production by me, Katerina, with advice from our podcast consultant, Sandy Waters. Rebecca gets significant creative feedback from her beta listener group. For this episode, special thanks goes to Derek, Bob, Josh, Marshall, Tony, and Jody. And to anyone else we might have missed, you are loved. We look forward to your company on the next episode. Ciao.